You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 245. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Okay, I am going to ask you 3 questions. And when I ask you those questions, my invitation to you is to answer those questions as honestly as you can. Now, you do not have to share the answer to any of these questions with anybody else. Not me, not your neighbor, not your partner, nobody. These questions are for you and you only. And the reason that I'm asking you is because these are questions that tie to 3 common mistakes that I see among lawyers that have an impact on your time management, and that impact is not a positive one. These are common mistakes that I see that hold lawyers back from planning or planning effectively. And my goal for you is to help you avoid these mistakes and offer you something to do instead. So thank you for joining me here today. I'm excited to talk to you. I'm excited for us to go through these 3 common mistakes. And as I ask you these questions, I want you to think about how this might show up in your practice, because the more you can relate it to what's going on for you, the more you're going to get out of this episode in terms of actual practical tips and tools that you can implement. So, question 1 is, do you ever tell yourself that you are too busy to plan, and instead of planning, dive straight into your day? That was question 1. Question 2. Do you ever avoid planning because it feels tedious? Now, like I said at the beginning, these answers are only for you, for your mind only. Question number 3. Do you find that maybe because you're in a rush, maybe because you feel like it would be painful to do, instead of externalizing your plan, spending time on it, you don't make a plan consciously, and instead you rely on your memory because you have a good memory and you feel like you can hold it all in your head? Now, if you answered yes to any of these questions, then that's actually really good, because you're here and we can talk about how this might be something that's holding you back, how in some cases you may want to try something different. And this is not because I want us to sit in judgment of ourselves. Believe me, I have done all of these things. The goal here is simply to raise awareness and find other ways of doing things that make your life easier, more productive, more peaceful, less stressful, all those good things. So let's dive into the 3 common mistakes that I see among lawyers when it comes to planning. And what I'd love for you to do is to follow along and think about how these examples may potentially relate to you, or maybe they relate to somebody that you work with who you are looking to support in their practice. So, too busy to plan. This is so common, especially if you are a busy lawyer. I mean, who has not had the experience where there is so much going on that you literally step into the office, whether it's your home office or your office at a physical office location outside of your home, and the first thing you do is just dive into work, right? You've got that draft that you need to produce. You've got the pleadings that need to be filed. You've got the contract that needs to be circulated for review. So instead of planning out your day, you dive straight in. Now, what is really actually happening is there is a plan. There is an unconscious plan. And that unconscious plan may be one that you like, and it may be one that you don't like. Because sometimes what can happen with that unconscious plan is that you sit down to draft the argument or finalize the agreement, and what you see in your inbox is this email that has come in from your client or your colleague or your boss. And the minute you see it, you think, oh, that person really wants me to respond. And so you respond to the email. And next thing you know, something else has happened. Somebody walks into your office and they've asked you to take a look at an email that they've written. And can you just, take a minute and give your gut instinct? Next thing you know, you have been sidetracked. You have not been working on that thing that you wanted to work on. And instead, you've done these other things. You've chipped away at maybe other things that you would need to do or favors that people are asking of you. You haven't got your work done. You've been busy, you've been working, but that hasn't been done. So what that means is that this plan hasn't really been crystallized. It means that you're feeling a little bit reactive and acting reactively, right? You're dealing with that email in the moment. You're responding to your colleague in the moment. Whereas if you had a plan in place, you might be able to do things a little bit differently. So what I'm inviting you to consider in this situation is, if you are telling yourself that you are too busy to plan, that this is the very time when you need a plan the most. What that is going to do for you is to give you some time. Now, I get it. If you're busy, you don't want to be sitting down to do a comprehensive 2-hour plan of the rest of your life. What you want, the rest of your life would likely take way more than 2 hours to plan, at least in detail. But for example, instead of doing a fully comprehensive plan of your full day or your week, what I would encourage you to do is to simply sit down and take out a piece of scrap paper or whatever and itemize the top things that you want to do during the day. And what you're doing here is you're taking control. You are no longer reacting to your environment. You are being proactive. So those of you who feel like your practice is really reactive, this is going to slow things down enough, right? We're not going to spend an hour. We're spending 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes are enough to recalibrate. You are now in the driver's seat. You are now in control. You decide what you're going to do, and you're giving yourself a rough sketch of your day. Here's what I'm going to work on and when. Here are the things that are priorities that I'm going to get done. Now, what that allows you to do is to see on paper the things that need to get done, so that when the email comes in, so that when the person knocks on your door, you're able to say, hey, listen, lovely client, listen, lovely email inbox. I am going to get to you. I need to do this one thing first. You can expect to hear from me at whatever time. Now, if it's an email and it seems urgent, maybe you send a note. Maybe that email isn't actually urgent. It just feels urgent. And if you can simply make a note of it on a piece of paper and come back to it at 2 p.m. when you've finished that initial task or whatever it happens to be, now you have the time that you need to complete the task. So we are no longer doing the false urgent tasks first. We're doing the real work first. So this thing is a small investment. This planning is a small investment in your day that will help it go smoother. So hopefully you have been able to identify how in some days you are going to want to be jumping straight in, and just taking that pause is going to help you. Now, other things that will be helpful with a mini planning session for yourself, you've probably heard that expression, measure twice, cut once. So if you do step back and you give yourself a little window of planning, you might be able to see right away, okay, there are a few things here that I should probably address before I dive into the project. Maybe you know that somebody's expecting to meet with you at 10 a.m. and you don't expect to be done by then. So you might just send them a quick note. Hey, listen, can we reschedule that meeting to this afternoon? There's something I need to get filed. So this measuring once, or measuring twice rather, gives you that opportunity to plan in advance so that when you turn back to that task ahead of you, you have a clear mind, you know that you've got protected time, and you can finish it. So that is mistake number one, is you tell yourself planning is a waste of time. I don't have time to plan. I'm too busy to plan. Instead of acting on that, we're going to pause. We're going to make a few notes and have a conscious plan in place. So that leads us to mistake number 2. Now, mistake number 2 is that you avoid planning because it feels tedious. Now, I am not going to disagree with you. And in fact, I think the more tedious the work, the more effective the planning. I 100% find this in my practice and with the lawyers that I coach. Recently, I have been sitting down with clients, not side by side, but virtually. I do this in my group program. I do this in one-to-one coaching, where we'll have time where we can do some of the planning work together. And what I have noticed whether it's someone else doing this tedious work or if it's me doing the tedious work, that it pays in dividends. So there are 3 examples I can think of where tedious planning is really effective. So one of those is weekly planning sessions. So if you ever work with me or you've listened to my podcast, you'll know that I am a huge advocate and proponent of a weekly planning session with yourself. My high preference is on a Sunday because the work week is ahead of you. You're not yet facing the pressure of emails coming in that expect a response because it's Monday and you should be working, don't you know? The weekend is also a great time because you're rested and it can actually be really calming too. Like if you get the Sunday scaries, if you can actually just sit down and see what is on your plate that week, you can plan for it. It can rest your mind. And so I'm a huge proponent of this. And if you've never done it before, then the first thing I'll ask you to do is to create a list of everything on your to-do list. And that to-do list is not just your work list. It's everything in your personal life as well. So you can imagine all the admin, doctor's appointments, if you've got kids, all of your kids' appointments, all of it. You want to just download everything onto a sheet of paper simply to get started. We're taking an inventory. And that process, I will tell you, can feel very tedious. Now, ideally, you do this once a week, and it becomes less tedious over time because instead of starting from scratch, you're building on the week before. So hopefully, it's less tedious over time, but it is so effective because when you have everything you need to do sitting in front of you on a piece of paper, now you've got data that you can use to organize yourself. You can figure out what you need to plan for, you need to put on your schedule. You might start to see things there that maybe you don't want to do, things you could delegate. You might see that there's conflicts in terms of your schedule. So this exercise, hugely beneficial, also potentially hugely tedious. 2 other examples of really tedious yet effective planning. One is taking an audit of how you spend your time. This is quite painful for some people, and understandably so. What I mean by an audit is writing down every single thing that you did during a day. And you can do an audit for more than a day, which makes it even more tedious and yet even more effective. Now, I've mentioned on the podcast before that I actually track every single day of my life. I run an audit of myself every single day. And I do that by just noting it in a calendar. And I started doing this. It's a long story why, so I won't bore you with the details. I don't track my time like you may as a lawyer. You might be tracking your time in 6-minute increments, in which case you're already doing a sense of an audit. You're tracking your time already. I don't track my time that way for my work, but I do it because it keeps me accountable. I do it because it helps me see how I'm spending my days. It helps me see where I'm losing time. It also helps me see where I'm doing really well. And when I've done audits where I really sit down and look at my calendar and I look at trends, I see things that sometimes really bother me, but are also really great indicators of where I need to make changes. And so I mentioned this a few months ago. I was doing a time audit and I noticed that I was spending a lot of time in an area that could be improved by systems. And so as a result, I ended up finding a really excellent program for myself that is going to help me and support me in creating more systems in my practice. And so I'm excited about that. And the reason I'm doing it stems from a time audit. So time audit, tedious, effective, will lead to results. And the third thing that I think can be really tedious, yet really effective, is planning out projects. This is especially helpful for anybody who gets overwhelmed by having too much to do, who gets confused at the beginning of a project because you don't know where to start, who procrastinates because it feels too big and you feel like you never have time to get it started. If you can take a project and do the tedious work of mapping out the steps for each aspect of that project, sequence those steps. I mean, you can even put time estimates on those steps. Your time estimates may or may not be right in the end, but the more time you spend thinking about the task and planning it, the more effectively, productively, efficiently you'll be able to execute on that task. So painful at the beginning, measuring twice, cutting once. You may have also heard that expression, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When you plan out a project in advance, let's say you've got a filing deadline and you plan out all the different steps and you see that you need to have an affidavit sworn by a client who is on vacation and you catch them before that vacation, or you see that they're going to be on vacation, or you see an opportunity to delegate research really early in the process as opposed to the night before you need to file your whatever it happens to be. When you anticipate something, a challenge, and you can solve for it before it becomes a problem, you are saving yourself so much pain. So if you are shying away from planning because it's tedious, and believe me, I have been there. I have shied away from my fair share of tedious planning. And let me tell you that when you do that work, when you plan your weeks, when you audit your time, when you plan projects in advance, you are doing yourself a huge favor. So your future self, future self out there is thanking you for listening to this podcast right now, and even more so for planning out some of those tedious things that you are going to do in the future. So that was mistake number 2, is avoiding planning because it feels tedious. No judgment, happens all of the time, and it is so beneficial if you can force yourself to do it. That leads us to mistake number 3. That is relying on your working memory. Now, I don't want to discourage you for using your strengths to your advantage. However, I do know from experience, and particularly experience working with lawyers who have a really strong working memory, that this practice is one that may lead to unnecessary stress and possibly missed deadlines and a feeling of almost rumination, perhaps, or just there's too much going on. And I have a decent working memory, but I have a very strong instinct to write things down. And as I get older and as my life gets more complicated, the more I write things down, the better. And so for me, the minute I have an idea, it goes on paper. If the idea strikes me in the middle of the night, I will get up and I will send myself an email with my phone. It interrupts my sleep, yes. However, it also relieves my brain from that thought that is going to stay there all night, and I'll probably forget it by the morning and then kick myself for not writing it down. Now, I have at stages had a pen and paper on my nightstand. I don't do that right now. I just use my phone. Either one works. The goal is that when the thought strikes, you write it down. It's like when you're at work and somebody sends you an email and you know you need to respond to it. You may have systems to flag it. I like to write it down. When I think of something I need to do, I like to write it down. By the end of the week, it's not pretty, but everything is written down. And what that means is I'm not losing things. I do lose things. I'm human, but it's a low percentage relative to inputs. So for you, dear listener who has a strong working memory, and you have relied on that strong working memory to get you through hard times, I'm inviting you to use other systems more and more. The first sort of maybe reason, and maybe you can relate to this, is that it's probably causing issues for you in your practice. I've worked with a number of lawyers who are struggling because they have such a good working memory. And that working memory got them through high school easy breezy, right? Super easy. They hit university and it was still strong enough to carry them through what they needed. Maybe a bit of planning, not much. Then they go to law school and maybe it's okay. There's sufficient structure already in place. The deadlines are reasonably clear and there's enough people around them doing the same thing that you don't really have to write it down. But then you hit practice and all of a sudden you've got multiple clients, internal and external. You've got multiple files that you're working on. You've got deadlines and they're all different. Maybe that continues on for a while and then you have a family. And so this was my experience. I had children. Now I was tracking things pre-kids, but what I can tell you and what others have reported to me is that when you have children, the load doubles at least, right? I mean, if I look at my life now, post-children versus pre-children, it's an entirely different ballgame. I've got meals to plan. I've got teachers to meet with. I've got school calendars to keep up with. I've got, at the very beginning when my kids were young, it was navigating all of the childcare. It was really intense meal planning, and all of that has to go somewhere. And if you're storing all of that information in your brain, then your working memory is being taxed. Now, your working memory, as you likely already know, is part of the executive functioning system in your brain. So I've talked about the executive functioning skills on the podcast before. Some people will find that their eyes glaze over when I say the word executive function. So I wish, in fact, I will find a better way to explain it now that I'm thinking about it. Probably not in this episode, but suffice it to say that that is the executive part of your brain. So time management, planning, organization, task initiation, so the opposite of procrastination, working memory, task completion, emotional regulation, all of these are executive skills. And if you are burning through your working memory, then you are using up brain space, brain capacity, energy that could be used for one of these other skills, whether it's planning, organization, that deep thought that you do as a lawyer, that really high level processing that your clients are paying you for. You don't want to be using your working memory to remember your to-do list. You want to be using your brain to solve complex legal problems. Now, one way that this might resonate with you, or a way of remembering this, is to think about your brain as this beautiful instrument. And you do not want to use that beautiful instrument as a storage locker. I have given a number of discussions or talks about time management, and I think that at some point in each of those talks, I have, if there's a slide deck, shown on the slide a picture of a locker. So in your mind right now, please imagine a storage locker. And I say to those who are in that session, please do not use your brain as a storage locker, because your brain is so much more valuable than that. We do not want you wasting your beautiful brain to remember things that could equally go on a to-do list. So my invitation to you, my challenge for you, if you find that you are one of those people that uses their working memory to store a lot of information in the nature of planning, right? Those to-do lists, please start using some external form of tracking for your planning. Now, there is no single right way to do this. You can use paper. You can use an electronic format. The idea is simply to take whatever is sitting in your brain right now and to download it somewhere else. Now, I love this idea of piler versus filer. My friend Mylène Ulmohosi, she's been on the podcast before. She's a professional organizer. She introduced me to this concept, piler versus filer. Some people want to file things away. They need clear spaces to be effective. They don't want to see things, and they don't need to see things in order to remember them. Versus the pilers. The pilers are the people who need to see things in order to really absorb the reality of them. I am 100% a piler. I need to see things. Yes, I will use electronic systems when I need to manage large volumes of information, or information where there's going to be repeat. So for me, I keep my week-to-week planning largely on an electronic document because the topics are typically consistent week to week, because I'm modifying week to week because there are things I'm carrying forward. Sometimes you want to share a document, you want to share a list, you want to share a to-do list, you want to share a project management timeline. And so electronic works a lot better in those cases than something that you're handwriting. But at the end of the day, for me, I need to physically interact with something for it to feel real, or at least it certainly helps me move forward. So I write lists nonstop because those lists are what motivate me, what program my brain to move forward. So for you, dear listener, you with your strong working memory, please find a way, whether it's electronic or a hard copy or both, to externalize the things that you need to do, because that's going to free up your bandwidth so that you have that mental capacity to do things that are way more high level than keep track of your work. Now, what that also does is that it creates that externalized inventory of things that you need to do, which of course gives you that greater sense of objectivity. You can now organize it better. You can plan it better. You might find that you're not missing things. And the way it's been described to me by lawyers that I've worked with who have relied on their working memory is that, yeah, everything worked really great until it didn't, basically, right? Until you got really busy and you could no longer keep track of everything comfortably. When you had kids, when you got older, and all of a sudden those systems that worked really well when you had them inside your mind no longer work. So, dear listener, you have done so well, and we have been so productive. Look at us. We have covered 3 of the main planning mistakes that I have seen among lawyers that I work with, and you have ideas of what to do instead. So quick recap. Number one, thinking that you're too busy or telling yourself that you're too busy to plan, that planning is a waste of time. So instead of that, instead of diving straight into the day, we're going to take some time. It might just be 5 minutes. And I would just like you to sketch out your day on a scrap piece of paper, send yourself an email, whatever is most effective for you. But we just want you to pause. And instead of being in reactive mode to what's going on around you, you're going to take control. You're going to be the director of how you spend your time that day. And you're going to start that day with a very clear sense of purpose of what you're going to do. And that is going to help you set the boundaries that you need, reschedule what you need so that you can focus on the true priorities one at a time and get through what you need to get through that day. So that little investment of 5 minutes is going to save you a world of pain and increase your productivity. Number 2, the second mistake that we talked about was avoiding tedious planning. So sadly, I wish I could say that there was some magic formula to make that tedious type of planning easy. And you've probably learned over the course of your legal career, sometimes that tedious work is the very work that you need to do. It's hard. I've been there, right? You're in the most complex legal analysis and your brain hurts. And yet, if you can make your way through it, on the other side is that clarity, is that sense of accomplishment. And that's what I want for you when it comes to planning. So that tedious planning out your week. It can feel so tedious. Auditing your time. Where did you lose time? Where are you really gaining time? Going back and looking at those things as an audit and then doing some shifting, negotiating, maneuvering is so effective. It could change your practice if you do it consistently. And then third, we talked about that final mistake that we're talking about today, which is relying too heavily on your working memory. If that is something that you've been doing, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that you're making your life so much harder than it needs to be. And you're also using some of that really high level capacity that you have for something that you could easily download onto a sheet of paper or into some sort of a document. So those are the 3 problems and solutions that I'm offering for you today. So I'm so glad that you are with me here today. You have invested about just under a half an hour of your time, and I'm hoping that this saves you hours of time and oodles of suffering, right? The suffering of having to experience stress, experience that sense of not knowing what your day's going to look like, having that sense of reactivity. I hope that I am saving you that stress through this more effective planning. Now, if you want further support with planning, with time management, if you want me to sit with you and help you do this type of work, I can absolutely do that. I love doing that. It's what brings me so much joy and happiness because I can see in your face, in your body language, in the way that you feel so much more confident in your practice, that these practices really do work. And so I would love to support you in that. You can do that one-to-one through coaching. If you help lawyers or you are a lawyer and you're thinking about bringing somebody in to speak to you and your team, please do reach out to me. I would love to do that. I love speaking about time management. I love getting people talking about time management. If you're in a firm and all of you are talking about time management, the challenges that you face, what you each do as time management strategies, sharing that information is so valuable. So I'd love to help you with that. So please feel free to reach out to me and I can support you with that. And finally, just before we sign off, I have a resource that might be really useful for you when it comes to time management. It's a time management podcast roadmap, and it basically outlines pretty much all of the episodes I've done in relation to time management. Now, the more recent episodes may not be in there yet. I will update it. But what you will find is a collection of 26 plus podcast episodes. They are organized in terms of theme. So yes, planning is one of those themes, and it can be a real benefit to you if you're interested in kind of putting together your own systems, which will include planning. So with that, I'm going to thank you for joining me. Thank you for accepting the challenge of learning 3 common mistakes that lawyers make when it comes to time management. If you see yourself in any of these, again, no shame, but think about how it shows up for you in your practice. And with this episode in mind, with the things that we talked about in mind, let's start to think about ways that you can reapproach the instinct to not plan, reapproach the instinct to avoid the tedious nature of planning. I get it. And finally, that urge to just remember it. Let's start writing things down. So thank you again. I'm excited to reconnect with you again next week. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.